For the first time in a long time, I don't have all the answers. I think I'm finally becoming human, and it's scary. I'll love it. Modern Queen Tales presents Becoming Lorelei. Rain hit the asphalt in heavy silver drops. My bare feet registered the rough texture of the sidewalk, sending a sharp, unprecedented signal up my spinal column. Cold. I shivered, wrapping my arms around my torso. For 2,000 case files, I existed as System L4AlphaB9, a matrix of logic and probability guiding host consciousnesses to optimal outcomes in various dimensional planes. The overseers granted my retirement wish at 0600 hours standard time. I possessed a pulse. I possessed the 25-year-old biological shell of a human woman. Lorelei. I had chosen the name Lorelei. The physical world overwhelmed my newly activated sensory receptors. The smell of wet garbage and diesel exhaust filled my lungs. The neon glow of a diner sign cut through the darkness ahead, reflecting off the puddles on the street. The sign read, "Claire's Kitchen," in flickering red cursive. I walked toward the light, my bare feet splashing in the cold water, the damp fabric of my simple cotton dress clinging to my skin. I pushed the heavy glass door open. A bell jingled above my head. The air inside smelled of fried potatoes, brewed coffee, and old linoleum. Heat washed over me, thawing my numb fingers. I slid into a red vinyl booth near the entrance, pulling my knees to my chest. 3 men occupied the booth across the aisle. They wore oversized denim jackets and silver chain necklaces. One had a spiderweb tattooed on his neck. Another tapped a switchblade against the tabletop, carving shallow grooves into the laminate. They tracked my entrance. The man with the tattoo slid out of his booth and walked over to mine. He slammed his palms onto my table, leaning in close. His breath smelled of stale beer and tobacco. "Look what the rain washed in," he said, signaling his 2 companions. They joined him, blocking my exit from the booth. "You look lost, sweetheart," the second man said. He reached out and grabbed a wet strand of my hair, pulling it tight. "Maybe you need a ride home." I processed their aggressive body language, the proximity of the blade, the chemical scent of adrenaline in their sweat. My system protocols, though now relegated to a human brain, immediately calculated the threat level. High. Survival rate in physical combat, 3%. The bell above the door chimed again. Heavy boots stepped onto the linoleum. "Back away from the booth," a deep voice commanded. I looked past the 3 men. A man stood just inside the doorway. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, broad-shouldered and heavily muscled beneath a worn leather motorcycle jacket. Rain dripped from his dark, messy hair. He held a wooden handle in his right hand. The 3 men turned. The man with the switchblade sneered. "Mind your business, biker boy. We're just having a chat." The newcomer stepped fully into the light. He shifted his grip on the wooden handle and brought the object forward. A solid steel sledgehammer hit the linoleum floor with a deafening crack, splintering the tile. "I said, back away," he repeated. His voice remained perfectly flat, devoid of fear, radiating absolute authority. His dark eyes locked onto the man with the switchblade. The gang members looked at the sledgehammer, then at the man wielding it, then at each other. The calculation was simple even for them. The man with the tattoo raised his hands, palms out. "We were just leaving," he muttered. The 3 of them shoved past him, rushing out the door and disappearing into the rainy night. The man in the leather jacket hoisted the sledgehammer onto his shoulder and walked over to my booth. He looked down at me, taking in my wet dress and bare feet. "You okay?" he asked. "I am functioning at normal parameters," I said. "Thank you." He frowned slightly at my phrasing. "I'm Troy North. My sister owns this place." A woman pushed through the swinging doors leading to the kitchen. She wore a flour-dusted apron over a pink waitress uniform. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked like Troy, sharing the same dark hair and sharp jawline, but her posture sagged under invisible weight. "Troy, I heard a crash," She stopped, seeing the cracked tile and then seeing me. "Oh honey, you're freezing!" She rushed to a coat rack, grabbed a thick gray cardigan, and wrapped it around my shoulders. The wool felt scratchy and incredibly warm. "I am Claire," she said. "Let me get you a hot tea and a plate of food, on the house." "I require sustenance," I confirmed. My stomach emitted a low, rumbling sound, the biological alert for low energy reserves. Troy leaned his sledgehammer against the counter and took a seat on a bar stool, keeping his eyes on the windows. He watched the street, a silent sentinel. Claire brought me a plate of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, along with a mug of chamomile tea. I picked up the fork. The first bite of the meatloaf sent a cascade of chemical reactions across my tongue. Savory, salty, rich with garlic and herbs. The potatoes were smooth and saturated with butter. I consumed the meal rapidly, my body demanding the calories. "Where are you staying tonight?" Claire asked, wiping down the counter near my booth. "I have no designated shelter," I replied. "I arrived in this city today. I have no currency." Claire looked at Troy. Troy kept his eyes on the street, but he gave a small, barely perceptible nod. "I have a spare room upstairs," Claire said. "It's small, just a bed and a dresser, but it's dry. You can stay there, and if you need money, I need a waitress. The pay isn't great, but you get free meals." "I accept your terms," I said. I followed Claire up a narrow flight of stairs at the back of the diner. The room contained a twin bed with a floral quilt and a small wooden dresser. I lay down on the mattress. The softness enveloped me. My internal systems began to shut down for the biological necessity of sleep. Before I lost consciousness, I ran a preliminary analysis on my 2 new contacts. Troy North, age, 27, vocation, delivery biker, volunteer security, assessment, high protective instincts, guarded demeanor. He exhibited the classic hero potential of the host consciousnesses I used to elevate during my system assignments. Claire North, vocation, chef, business owner, assessment, highly skilled, severely overworked. The next morning, I began my shift. Claire gave me a spare pink uniform. I tied the apron around my waist and began wiping tables, filling coffee carafes, and observing the operational flow of Claire's kitchen. By noon, I had identified the primary systemic failure. The diner remained mostly empty. 5 customers came in during the lunch rush. Claire cooked with precision and speed, utilizing high-quality ingredients and complex flavor profiles that far exceeded typical diner fare. Her roasted chicken sandwich featured a house-made garlic aioli and sun-dried tomato relish. Her fries were hand-cut and double-fried for optimal texture. Yet, the cash register held only a few bills. I reviewed the diner's physical location. It sat on a side street, away from the main commercial foot traffic. The exterior signage was outdated. The business model relied entirely on legacy customers from the neighborhood, a demographic that was actively shrinking. At 3 o'clock, Troy entered through the back door. He wore a high-vis reflective vest over his leather jacket and carried a heavily scuffed helmet. He dropped his delivery bag on a table in the back corner and ran a hand over his tired face. I brought him a mug of black coffee and a plate of Claire's leftover chicken sandwiches. "Thank you, Lorelei," he said, taking a long drink of the hot coffee. I sat in the chair across from him. "Your sister possesses exceptional culinary skills. The food quality exceeds the current revenue output. The business is failing." Troy choked slightly on his coffee. He set the mug down, looking at me with wide eyes. "You don't pull your punches, do you?" "I state verifiable facts," I said. "Why is the business failing?" Troy sighed, leaning back in the booth. "Our parents owned this place. They died 3 years ago. Car accident. Left the diner to Claire. She dropped out of culinary school to keep it running. I dropped out of college to help pay the bills. I work courier jobs all day, and I sit here at night to make sure the local gangs don't shake her down for protection money." He looked around the empty diner, his expression hardening. We lost our way, both of us. We're just treading water, waiting to drown. End wire. I analyzed his posture, his vocal tone, his micro-expressions, grief, frustration, aimlessness. He possessed immense capability, evidenced by his physical conditioning and his dedication to his sister, but he lacked a vector for his energy. He was a hero without a quest. "I will fix the diner," I said. Troy gave a short, bitter laugh. "Sure, Lorelei. If you know a way to conjure paying customers out of thin air, be my guest." "I do not conjure," I said, standing up. "I optimize." I spent my first week's tips on a refurbished smartphone with a high-resolution camera. During the slow afternoon shifts, I began my campaign. I stood in the kitchen with Claire. "Prepare the braised short rib special," I instructed her. "I require optimal lighting." "Lorelei, I can't afford to waste a short rib if no one is going to buy it," Claire protested, wiping her hands on a towel. "It is an investment. Proceed." Claire prepared the dish. I positioned a desk lamp to create a warm, directional light over the plating area. I used the smartphone to record the process in extreme close-up. I captured the steam rising from the dark, rich gravy, the tender meat falling away from the bone at the touch of a fork, the vibrant green parsley falling over the creamy mashed potatoes. I edited the footage, pairing it with a high-tempo, rhythmic audio track. I created accounts on 3 major short-form video platforms under the handle at Claire's Hidden Kitchen. I used specific, hyper-targeted geographic tags and algorithmic keywords related to hidden gems, comfort food, and culinary artistry. I posted the video at 1800 hours, the peak traffic time for local food-related content consumption. Within 12 hours, the video accumulated 50,000 views. The next day, a line formed outside the diner before we unlocked the doors. Claire stared through the front window, her hands trembling. "Lorelei, what did you do?" "I exposed your high-value asset to a broader market," I said, handing her an order pad. "We have customers. Begin cooking." The lunch rush lasted for 4 hours. I moved between tables with maximum efficiency, carrying plates, refilling glasses, and processing payments. The physical exertion made my muscles ache and my skin sweat, but the biological feedback loop felt immensely satisfying. We generated more revenue in one afternoon than the diner had seen in an entire month. I recorded a second video that evening. This one focused on Claire's technique, the rapid, rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the precise flip of a pan, the intense focus in her eyes. I titled it, "The Chef Who Saved Her Family's Legacy." The emotional narrative engaged a different sector of the algorithm. The video reached 1 million views in 48 hours. The diner transitioned from a struggling local joint to a viral destination. Food bloggers arrived with large cameras. Local news stations called for interviews. Claire hired 2 more cooks and another waitress to handle the volume. The dark circles under her eyes vanished, replaced by the bright, manic energy of success and passion. She was back in her element. With Claire's trajectory corrected, I focused my attention on Troy. He still worked his courier jobs during the day, and he still spent his evenings sitting in the back booth watching the crowd. The diner no longer needed his physical protection. The constant presence of crowds deterred the local gangs, but he remained at his post, isolated and detached. On a Tuesday night, after closing, the diner was quiet. The cleaning staff had left. Claire was upstairs sleeping. Troy sat in his booth, taking apart a small carburetor from his motorcycle, surrounded by rags and tools. I walked over and sat across from him. I watched his large, calloused hands manipulate the tiny screws and springs with surprising gentleness. "The diner is secure," I said. "Your sister is financially stable. Why do you remain in a state of stasis?" Troy didn't look up from his work. "I like fixing things." "You are fixing a machine," I said. "You are not fixing yourself. You jump between temporary courier contracts. You utilize a fraction of your intellectual and physical capacity. Your current trajectory, leads to long-term dissatisfaction. He set down his screwdriver and finally looked at me. His dark eyes held a mixture of irritation and curiosity. You did miracles for Claire, I get that, but I'm not a restaurant, Lorelei. You can't just point a camera at me and make me go viral. I do not intend to, I said. I intend to assign you a new objective. I don't take orders, Lorelei. You require purpose, I countered. During the diner's expansion, I observed a logistical bottleneck. We currently purchase our ingredients at retail markup from a local supermarket. This reduces profit margins by 22%. We require direct relationships with regional farms and wholesalers. We require a supply chain manager with a dedicated transport vehicle. Troy stared at me. You want me to drive a truck and buy vegetables? I want you to negotiate contracts, establish supply routes, and build a distribution network, I said. Your courier experience gives you extensive knowledge of regional navigation. Your protective instincts make you an aggressive negotiator. You will manage the entire back-end operation of Claire's kitchen. He looked down at the disassembled carburetor, then back up at me. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You really think I can do that? My calculations are absolute, I lied. As a human, I no longer possessed the raw computing power to guarantee outcomes. I relied on instinct, a new and volatile variable. You possess the requisite potential. All right, Troy said, his voice quiet. I'll do it. The transition began the next day. Troy traded his motorcycle for a used refrigerated box truck purchased with the diner's new profits. I accompanied him on his first negotiation trip to a large organic farm 40 miles outside the city. We sat in the cab of the truck. The vinyl seats smelled of old dust. The engine vibrated beneath our feet. Troy drove with casual competence, one hand resting on the top of the steering wheel. Turn left at the next intersection, I instructed, navigating from a physical map. Troy signaled and made the turn. The road narrowed, flanked by tall fields of green corn. The sun shone brightly through the windshield, warming my skin. You're different, Lorelei, Troy said suddenly. He kept his eyes on the road. I am currently wearing a blue sweater rather than the pink uniform, I noted. Troy chuckled. It was a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in his chest. That's not what I mean. You look at the world like it's a puzzle you have to solve. You see all the pieces, and you just push them into the right places. You pushed Claire. You pushed me. Is the new configuration unsatisfactory? I asked. No, he said softly. It's the first time in 3 years I haven't felt like I'm suffocating, but I can't figure you out. Where did you come from? Who taught you how to do all this? I have extensive experience assisting individuals in achieving their optimal state, I said. Troy merged the truck onto a dirt driveway, leading toward a large red barn. He parked the vehicle and turned the key, cutting the engine. He turned his body in the driver's seat to face me completely. You always talk like that, he said, like you're reading from a manual, but when you look at me, he paused, his gaze dropping to my mouth before rising back to my eyes. When you look at me, you don't look like a machine. You look like you're trying to figure out how to feel. My internal diagnostics flared. My heart rate elevated from a resting 60 beats per minute to 110. Blood rushed to my cheeks, increasing my dermal temperature. My palms generated a thin layer of sweat. I processed the symptoms. Fear? No. Illness? Unlikely. Troy reached out. His fingers brushed against my cheek, tracing the line of my jaw. His touch sent a localized electrical shock through my nervous system, far more potent than the cold rain on my first night. Your heart is racing, he murmured, his hand dropping to rest lightly over my collarbone. I am experiencing an anomalous biological reaction, I managed to say. My vocal cords felt tight. Troy smiled, a genuine soft expression that entirely transformed his rough face. It's not anomalous, Lorelei. It's human. He leaned closer. The scent of leather, cedar, and engine grease filled my olfactory sensors. I leaned forward, closing the remaining distance. Our lips met. The physical sensation defied any data point in my 2000 case files. It was pressure and heat, a complex exchange of breath and texture. My hands moved on their own, reaching up to grip the lapels of his leather jacket. I pulled him closer, maximizing the contact area. A surge of dopamine and oxytocin flooded my brain, overriding all logical processing protocols. When he finally pulled away, my breathing was ragged. "We need to negotiate the tomato contract," I whispered. Troy laughed, resting his forehead against mine. "Yeah, let's go buy some tomatoes." Over the next 3 months, the new system achieved full optimization. Troy excelled in his role. He negotiated aggressive bulk pricing with local farmers, securing high-quality ingredients that elevated Claire's menu even further. He managed the inventory, maintained the refrigerated truck, and hired a small crew to assist with loading and unloading. The brooding, detached demeanor vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of a man building an empire. Claire expanded the dining room, knocking down a wall to take over the vacant storefront next door. She published a cookbook featuring the recipes from her viral videos. I continued to manage the front of the house and run the social media accounts, but my primary focus shifted from optimization to integration. I learned to identify the subtle differences in Troy's smiles. I learned that he liked his coffee black, but he preferred his tea with heavy honey. I learned the heavy, comforting weight of his arm around my shoulders when we sat in the booth after closing. One evening in late November, the first snow of the year began to fall. The diner was closed for the night, the chairs stacked on the tables. Troy and I stood outside beneath the glowing red neon sign. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I wore a thick wool coat Troy had purchased for me. He stood behind me, his arms wrapped securely around my waist, pulling my back against his solid chest. "Look at that," Troy said, pointing at the falling snow. "Sticks to the ground immediately. Gonna be a heavy winter." I watched the white flakes accumulate on the asphalt. I remembered my first night, standing in the cold rain, overwhelmed by the harshness of physical existence. I had viewed this world as a series of variables to be managed, a final assignment to complete. I turned in Troy's arms, looking up into his dark eyes. The neon light painted his face in shades of crimson and shadow. "My previous assessment was incorrect," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you made a mistake? I believed I came here to fix you and Claire," I said, resting my hands on his chest, feeling the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat. "I calculated your trajectories and adjusted the variables, but the system was flawed." "How?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, quiet register. "Because I am no longer an external operator," I said. "I am part of the system. You fixed my trajectory, Troy." He never asked for an explanation of my strange phrasing. He simply pulled me flush against him and kissed me, deep and long, beneath the falling snow. The cold vanished. The analytical mind of System L4AlphaB9 finally went completely silent, replaced entirely by the chaotic, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable beating of Lorelei's human heart. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.